Today, we're going to talk about how to hire the best attorneys and really the things that law firms can do during the hiring process to both attract them and to keep them engaged. And it's a very competitive hiring market right now. So I think this is a fairly important presentation to go over today. And typically, the way I do the presentations is I'll give a short presentation. Usually, this will probably last about 40 minutes. And then after that, I'll take as many questions as everyone has. So a lot of organizations, it's obviously the quality of the people that you hire has a lot to do with the success that you'll have as a law firm. And the law firms that understand how to hire people the best typically do much better. And then when you hire effectively, it makes you more profitable. It makes people stick around. And the hiring process is really the first time people see you. So it sets up the dynamic for everything that's going to come. So one of the most important things that when you do hire is that you should have very clearly defined hiring needs. And what that means is you should always have minimum standards in terms of the type of people that you hire. And most large law firms do. I gave a presentation yesterday for attorneys that talked about just a bunch of different things that most large law firms avoid. And they avoid them because they know that when they've taken a chance on people that come outside of those parameters that they make mistakes. And those are actually competitive business advantages. So what I see all the time, or I see a lot of sometimes startup law firms that will go outside of normal hiring. And when they do that, they'll violate all sorts of hiring rules and they'll have problems. There's just all sorts of requirements that you need to have. And I'm not going to go into all of those hiring requirements right now, but certain things are employment stability if the person has, you want to have established certain academic qualifications for your firm. You want to have attorneys that have a certain amount of experience if you're hiring them laterally. And most law firms have that. And so the best law firms and the largest law firms typically have grade point cutoffs for almost every school. Certain schools they won't hire from, certain schools they try to hire from, certain firms they hire from, certain firms they don't hire from, a certain amount of stability, business. And so these are all kind of competitive advantages. And you don't need to have all of your hiring requirements be that rigid, but you need to be very careful in terms of how you're hiring. Many firms, for example, right now, corporate is a very active practice area. And lots of firms sometimes are asking for all types of corporate attorneys. The most organized firms, though, are always going to be asking for specific types of corporate attorneys, even at specific class levels. And sometimes they're not even going to be going outside of that. So it's important that you know what you want and that you're continually evaluating what you want. And that's really your role in HR and as a leader of a firm is to understand, constantly know the kind of people you want, because when you have business coming in and when you're a growing firm and there's work to be done, you're losing obviously a lot of money if you don't know exactly what you want. And the thing is that attorneys know very well the openings that are in the market. I've run job sites and also running a recruiting firm. Every day that new jobs come out, tons of people apply to them. So people are monitoring your openings. They know what you're looking for. They're trying to get into better firms. They're trying to get new jobs. And so when you consistently have openings that are defined in the market, you're going to be much better off than if you're not. And so all law firms really should consistently have openings and things that they would hire on their websites. An example is most law firms that do patent related work always have openings for patent attorneys. But they don't always advertise them. So some law firms are extremely good at advertising patent openings, like Morrison and Foerster is very good, and Wilson Sonsini is very good. And so all the patent attorneys automatically apply to those firms. But many firms that don't advertise their jobs or even just put their jobs on their website never hardly ever get applicants. So we have firms that don't advertise their jobs and never publicize their jobs and will regularly hire 6, 7, 10 patent attorneys from us a year. And there's nothing wrong. That's certainly good for our business, but you need to be publicizing your openings and you need to get them out there, at least on your website. If they're on your website, attorneys will find them very quickly. And if you know what you have, what your openings are, and you're constantly pushing things out there that you would want and the kind of people you would hire, you're going to be better off. And there's certain firms that are just always hiring certain types of people. They're always hiring certain types of corporate attorneys. Some firms are always looking for litigators. Other firms are always willing to hire people in different practice areas that come along. And so if you do have openings or people that you want to hire, just make sure that those openings are out there. It's going to make you more profitable. You're going to see more candidates, and it's going to help you a great deal. And then communicating your hiring needs means really just making sure your openings are on your website. Tell recruiters, if you want to use recruiters, what your openings are. Post them in different locations where they're likely to be found. Many times it's useful to tell your own employees about the jobs, because your own employees are very good many times at getting the jobs out, so that can be helpful. Other associates, some law firms will actually offer bounties, which can be very effective in terms of getting applicants in. Some law firms will pay $10,000 or $20,000 to an associate if they refer someone good, and that can be very effective, because then they will go out and look for people. And I recommend that it's not just search consultants that can help you. It's the people in your own firm and also in the community, and just getting out there and talking to people about where the candidates are, and making your openings known. I think one of the most effective things any firm can do is to put their jobs just on their website, because when you do that, people find them and you just make them visible, and people know what you're hiring for, and you will see lots of candidates. And it can be extremely helpful to do that. And you should have openings just for firms that are automatically seeking certain types of people, if you're seeking certain types of people. So we've had firms email us before and say, we're looking for partners with at least, just hypothetically, $500,000 in business. And there's firms like that all over the country. And the ones that do that, we will send them candidates that have 500,000 or $1 million or $2 million in business, and they get them regularly from us. And so just by telling us that and putting that sort of thing out, what you want out there, whether it's to a recruiter or just on your website, it can be very helpful, and you will get people that you wouldn't normally see. And when those firms get those sorts of people, it can make you much more profitable and make everything run better. So you really do need to do what you can to communicate your hiring needs. And then the big one is, I think, is having the correct screening mechanisms in place. In most cases, the recruiting coordinator will receive a letter, an email, or something concerning a candidate, and then people try to decide who should be brought in for an interview. And in a lot of times, a lot of firms, the HR people are so effective. They know exactly what the firm is looking for, so they really do not need to even show it to attorneys, or if the HR person is an attorney, other attorneys, and they know the kind of criteria that the firm's looking for. And I certainly have a very good sense of that for a lot of firms. But if you need to very quickly screen resumes when they come in, and realizing that whoever's looking for a job is probably going to be looking at other places as well. So one of the things that I always say to our candidates is that when people are applying to work with you, they are generally applying to other recruiters at the same time. They're applying to lots of firms at the same time, and so you have to move quickly. And you also have to move quickly when applicants come in, because you just have to realize that other people are talking to that candidate. And if you're not the first in line, the first person to bond with them is often going to be the one that hires them. And having the right people review resumes, interview candidates, and decide if they're a good fit is very important. Obviously, there's lots of firms out there that don't have the right processes in place for reviewing resumes. So sometimes people that are reviewing resumes will be overly critical. They could be threatened by bringing new people in if they're attorneys. Sometimes I've even seen some law firms put associates in charge of reviewing resumes of people that potentially could be the replacement, and that doesn't go well. People that don't want others to be there interviewing can go well. So you need to decide who you're going to put in charge of that, and who's a good fit, and who has the right personality. And I've also seen lots of instances where the wrong attorney has been interviewing someone. There's times when a litigation attorney may interview a corporate candidate and not really know what to look for. And different practice groups have different standards. So people don't necessarily understand that. And so you need to make sure that when people come in different practice areas, the right people are interviewing them. And then, but the big thing that I just, completely really want to emphasize is the ability to respond very quickly to resumes. It's difficult because there's such a volume of resumes coming in to respond to everything very quickly, which is one reason using applicant tracking systems can be very important and help you. But at the same time, you need to make sure if you're getting yeses and nos from, if you're in HR and you're getting yeses and nos from other attorneys to review, that you could answer as quickly, because you need to make quick decisions. And just remember that if you sit on a resume for a week or two, then someone else is probably, if it's a very good candidate, probably interviewing the candidate in that time. So the person may actually have an offer by the time you get around to doing a screening interview, which is a very common thing. It's always a good idea to try to review things as quickly as possible, and firms shoot themselves in the foot all the time. And having different people in the firm reviewing it is important, and having different perspectives, especially with a recent emphasis on diversity, which is increasing more and more. There's certain types of things in people's backgrounds that a lot of people will look for, but may not necessarily determine the success of an attorney. And you want to try to be able to bring in people from different backgrounds. And so having people with different feelings about what can make a good attorney is important, and involving them in the hiring process. And so you just have to be careful, and you want to make sure that you have multiple people reviewing them. And then this is just, again, once you've identified a candidate, and that you should move very quickly. Most candidates will accept the first offer they get, and that's just a fact. And they like it when people pursue them and want to talk to them right away. That makes them very happy. And I think that people don't like being made to wait, and people feel that if there's a really good match there, then someone likes them right away, that they're likely to do better. People want to go where they're appreciated, and where they feel cared about, and where people show an immediate interest in them and have a need for them. And I just, all the time, not all the time, quite often, we receive calls from firms where the person may have been submitted there 6 months ago, and finally the firm's getting around to responding or whatever. And a lot of times those actually result in placements, and then everybody's very happy. But many times when that happens, the person already has another job. It can really hurt you if you're not responding more quickly. And then the other thing that I think is very important is how to interview. And that would be a whole separate discussion, I think. But the thing to realize is that the attorney is the asset of the firm. So if you don't have good attorneys, or you're hiring people with problems, or you're hiring people that are going to be dead weight, then you're making mistakes. And I see, when I don't I've been doing this for so long, but if I don't interview someone that comes into our company, many times the wrong people are hired. I had an instance of that just a few days ago. So you have to, the task of the interviewer is extremely important, because if the interviewer is not really on board with your company and law firm, then you're not going to bring in the right people. And it's very difficult to get attorneys to interview other attorneys many times, because they're trying to bill hours, they're not preparing. And really, so you do need to have very well-defined outlines of the questions that you're asking everybody that you're interviewing. We have things at BCG when we interview, of course, every candidate that we work with. And there's several questions that the candidate needs to answer, and then that we also ask them on the phone and on Zoom calls, to make sure that we understand exactly what the person's about. And many times we'll find very interesting information on their resumes and so forth when we interview them, and we didn't realize what the person was doing and so forth. Interviewing people is important, and understanding and having special questions that you ask that are good for your firm. And one of the things that I recommend is you do want to try to get your candidates talking a lot. It can be boring for interviewers to sit there listening to someone drone on and on, especially about the kind of work that they're doing sometimes, but you need to get as much information as possible. And there's a lot of factors that you want to know. One of the big ones, of course, is why the person's looking for a job. But you want to understand if the person's a good fit. You want to get a sense of whether they be a good worker or not. And you really want to learn about the person and things on their resume that you may not see right away. And you should watch the body language. Many times the body language of an attorney can give off a lot of information. It can show that the person really probably isn't interested. They may seem distracted, or they may not seem interested in the job. And you want to see enthusiasm, and they should also establish a rapport with you, because if they can establish a rapport with you, then they can establish a rapport with clients and judges and other people that they need to. You need to understand all that, and when you interview them, and if the person's reasons are a good fit for you, and they may not be, that's something to think about. And there's usually many candidates who want to change jobs as for money as there are for career advancement. You really, and then you need to understand what's going on. You also want to know why the person's looking. So that's really, in my opinion, the most important thing. And what that means is the person leaving because they're doing a bad job? Is the person leaving because something happened negative that was negative at their firm? Is the person leaving because they don't like the work that they're doing? You just need to really understand that. And in my opinion, I've been doing this for so long, but I think that the best reason for people leaving a firm and moving to a new one is either they're moving home, meaning they're moving from somewhere that they grew up in or where their spouse grew up in or something where they're going to stay for a long time, or they're moving to a firm that's offering them because they want to improve themselves. So they may want to move to a bigger firm with more challenges, or they may want to move to a firm where they can get more experience. But you really just, if you have to look at it from a black and white perspective, the big thing that you want to see is you want to see that the person is leaving because they're trying to improve themselves and find something more stable is really, and whether it's being more involved in their practice area, working on bigger clients and that sort of thing. If someone's unclear about leaving, then that could be a problem. They may not want to practice law. They may be bored, and they'll get bored at your firm too. So the person should have come in with well-defined reasons, and they should come in really enthusiastic to talk to you about your firm, and they should have researched it and really want the job. And then, of course, you should always have the candidate ask questions during the interview. I don't like questions when people ask things about salary. I don't like when people ask about hours. All those kind of questions are obviously important to people. But at the same time, people should be most interested in the work that they'd be doing. And you can get a good sense of that when you interview people. And you always want to see the kind of questions that the person has. And many times, people will ask questions about working at home or doing things that suggest, that they may not want to be as involved in your firm as other people. And that's just something to think about. Because if you see that sort of stuff, then it could be a little bit difficult for you. And then the other thing is references should be checked. So most organizations are going to postpone references until they've interviewed a lot of people. But checking references, I think, is very important because, and you need to do it, and preferably at the final hiring stage. And references are important because it's going to tell you people that are not good. You can, and also people that are good. So people that do a really good work typically have people that will give them very positive references, and if they don't do good work, you're not going to get positive references from them. And in order to do that, you should always ask people about how they were reviewed and how their work was met in the past, what were the attorneys that were most difficult to work with and why they were difficult. You should ask them about things about their performance reviews, and then you should also ask them which ones they believe were accurate and not accurate. So a lot of times you can learn how the attorney did based on their own answers to this stuff, even without checking references. And many times attorneys will go on the offensive and so forth. And there's certainly nothing wrong with people having a bad experience at a law firm or not doing the best work at one law firm and then going to another where they incorporate those lessons. But at the same time, you have to realize that your eagerness to hire people when you're losing money by not having the work done, or when your attorneys are really trying to get work done quickly, can hurt you. So you want to make sure that you really ask questions and bring in people that are going to do a good job. The best law firms that I think that hire people, when they do bring them in, they have a very good sense of the quality of work that the person's likely to do and how they're going to fit in there. And just asking people how to evaluate their previous employer, what they learned, and so forth can help them. I was working with a candidate not too long ago, and I asked him how his reviews were, and he said they weren't that great. And I said, what did you take away from them? And he said, I should, be giving my work to paralegals and legal secretaries to proof more. And I thought that seemed like a pretty bad answer because he basically was saying that he was doing poor work, and so even though he was an attorney, he wanted to rely on paralegal and legal secretary to do something that he should be doing. That was not a candidate that I felt comfortable working with. And so sometimes people will literally give you answers like that, which tell you a lot. Or they'll say things like, I was working with another person and I said, what didn't you like about the firm? And he said, well, I didn't like that it was so hard to get work. And I said, why was it hard to get work? And he said, because I was working in, I don't know, he said he was working in the California office or something, and the work was handed out by the New York office, but you had to be in your office at 8 a.m. on Mondays to get assignments if you wanted to get assignments. And he said he didn't become an attorney to have to rush into work at 8 a.m. on a Monday. And I thought that was ridiculous. So he had lost his job for not having enough work. So these are the sorts of questions that you can learn a lot about people and whether or not they're likely to be good fits. And that can save you a lot of problems later on. And there are people that are just excellent attorneys, and the majority of people would have good references, but that's just something to think about. Now, recruiting coordinators usually check references, and then within corporations, human resources departments usually check references. There's a lot of recruiting coordinators that are established within different firms, and the way they check references is they just call each other, which is a great way of doing things. And they ask, how is this person doing? And then if the recruiting coordinator doesn't know, they can check and find out. So that's one of the best ways that they're typically checked. And that's on off the, I should have been talking about it, but that's how references are checked a lot, is recruiting coordinators just talk to each other and they know each other from events and so forth. And so that's one way it happens. And they know the personalities, and a lot of times if someone has worked with someone who's very difficult, or the firm's not a great place to work, then they can actually give better information about what normally would be not as positive a reference to someone about that. So that can be helpful. And so there's really no hard and fast rule for checking references. I think it's better to check references usually after an offer, but that's my feeling. You certainly need to be very careful about checking references at a current employer, but checking at previous employers can also be very good. There's professional companies that will check references that I've spoken with and worked with before. If you don't want to do it at your firm, and they many times can do a great job and they move very quickly. But you should always, when you do check references, it shouldn't be like this formal call where you say, I'm just calling to check references and you're talking to a stranger. You should always try to lighten up and be nice to the person and friendly, and talk to them about what you do and what, and then if you get them to lighten up a little bit, the reference typically will open up, because people are always guarded. No one wants to get sued, and everybody's always tries to be as careful as possible. That's a good way to check references many times. So you can ask people many questions, and these are just some of the questions about, why was a person selected to work there? What did you like about them? Why did they leave? Were they replaced after they left? And then things about anything about them that would make us want to not hire them. And just some other ones would be, would you consider rehiring them? That's obviously a good one. And if the person says definitely, then that means do a good job. If they say I don't know, that's usually a good sign as well. And then just things about your relationship with them, what the person was like personally, how the person works under pressure, whether or not they can relate to support staff and others. And so how do they get along with people? Their written and oral communication skills, demeanor, how impressed you are with them. And typically you're going to get one or two negative statements. So it's not, most people burn bridges, and sometimes they leave and aren't nice when they leave. Sometimes young people are still in the process of learning their values and becoming attorneys, and so they may not be the best people. And you should always just ask more information to judge things on your own. You need to understand, that many references are also going to have a difficult time even being nice about anybody once they leave. There was a funny thing that a recruiter once said to me, that what he would do when another recruiting firm would call to ask for references, you'd say if the person was a good recruiter, he would give them a horrible reference. If they were a bad recruiter, he would give them a great reference, which I thought was kind of funny. So he was always trying to undermine his competitors that way. So you have to be careful what you say, or what you take things somewhat with a grain of salt. And then you can also ask, is there anyone else I could talk to, and that sort of thing. One of the things, though, about references that I think are important to keep in mind is The biggest reference really is the person's resume. So if the person's been at a firm for 5 or 6 years, when you're talking to them, the chances are they were very good at their job. They've been there 2 or 3 years, they're probably pretty good too. So the only issues with references I see where you really need to buckle down many times are when the person moves jobs every year or hasn't stayed in one place very long or seems like they're changing direction or has large gaps in their employment. Then your references are really going to be a lot more important. But otherwise, I don't think they're extremely important if the person has a lot of employment stability. And then understanding the person's strengths and weaknesses can also help you and give you a lot of insight if the person will do really well at your current firm. One of the things I don't like about reference checking is when people are trying to go to a new job, they are many times trying to turn over a new leaf and they want to start fresh and they want to act in a way where they're not having any of the issues that may have plagued them in the past or mistakes that they made early in their careers. And that's one of the things it can impact how you see people sometimes in a negative way. But at the same time, reference checks can help you avoid catastrophes. And there are people that are catastrophes. Every year or two, I hire someone. If I hire 20 people in a year, one of the people will invariably have some very serious problems in their background, whether it's substance abuse or they may have done something dishonest with a previous employer. They may have sued previous employers. You just never know. And so you need to be very careful. And there's nothing wrong, of course, with any of these things. But if that's going to impact their job, then it's not a good thing. And if someone is dishonest, it's not a good thing. So you need to really be very careful when you're bringing new people in that you're not hiring people that are likely to be problems. And a lot of times, when there are going to be problems, it's hard to come up with a hard and fast rule, but many times the people that there's problems with, typically there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors. Like the person doesn't quite connect, doesn't quite give you all the information you want, doesn't it just everything just seems a little bit manufactured, and then there's just a lack of real connection, and the person seems hurried to give hand. There's just certain things that I've noticed over my career of people that can be a little bit problematical, and references a lot of times can bring that out. And then the other thing is that making the most rapid hiring decisions. I just keep bringing that up again and again, but hiring people very quickly is really very smart, and very few law firms are organized enough to hire quickly. I've been working for law firms before that the fastest they've ever hired a lateral partner has been like in 6 or 7 months, and that's moving quickly for them. But moving fast, making rapid decisions is very important. Now, I want to caution you that rapid decisions do not mean very rapid decisions. So I've seen firms make offers to people within 24 to 48 hours of getting their resume. And law firms that do that typically scare people away, even when it's a really good offer. But making an offer rapidly means getting the person in to talk to you within a few days, receiving their resume, or at least scheduling something that fast, and then doing a quick follow-up in a few days about a callback, and then trying to make a decision after the callback very quickly too. The organizations that move the fastest and march through things typically do the best. And when law firms are growing quickly, a lot of times they will make offers actually in the callback interview, sometimes in the end of that. And people like that. It makes them feel desired. It makes them feel that the firm could be a good fit. It makes them feel special. It gives them something to tell their family and other people about, and it's very positive. So the better you do with that, the being able to make those decisions, the faster your firm will grow. And more people will actually interview with your firm if word gets around. If you like people, you make offers in the interviews. You'll probably get more applicants in the interviews because a lot of times people do want to get offers quickly. And then another thing about after an offer is made is that when people are always going to have questions, and so that you just can't make an offer and then expect everything to work out. But you need to very quickly tell the people that you like them. I've seen some firms in Silicon Valley that will actually send big gift baskets and so forth with T-shirts with the hiring organization's name on it and so forth after making them an offer. And people like that, and they like notes. They like getting gifts and cups in the mail and things like that. It makes people excited, like they're part of a team and that someone likes them and that all this hard work that they've done is very useful. And then other firms will say things like, why don't you come back and ask your attorneys more questions in person after an offer? Like they just want to be very accessible. They want people to be there. And some firms will even make offers, and then after the person goes home, they'll offer to fly them back and interview and go out to dinner and so forth. This show of concern can make a huge difference, and people like that. And people remember gifts, and they remember that you being solicitous of them and really wanting them to work there. And then, I like the gifts idea. That's something that we're going to start doing with firms that interview our people, just just a thank you, and it's a good thing. And if you're doing these things, then the people are going to choose you as opposed to other firms. They're going to choose to work with you instead. Okay, that is my presentation, and I will take a quick break for just a few minutes, some more coffee, and then I will come back and answer as many questions as anyone has about the presentation today and other questions you may have. Thanks. Okay, the first question is, let's say that I am, let me just open something here so I can Word document. Okay, so the first question is, let's say I'm building out I'm building out a new law firm from scratch. Who should I hire first? How many people should I have in my team from the beginning? Well, typically a new law firm, if you're building a new law firm from scratch, the first people that you want to hire, you would probably want to have at least some administrative support for you. And you would need to have business coming in first. And typically when a law firm starts, someone hires someone to help them. And then as they get more busy and busier, they'll hire more attorneys. But I don't know. I think the amount of people that you hire are going to will really depend on how many people are, how much work that you have. And everything about running a law firm depends on how much work that you have. Okay, what are some of the most important qualities to look for in an attorney? I think when you're hiring people, I think there's really 4 questions that I always talk about. And it's, can you do the job? And then, can you be managed? And will you do the job long term? Do you want the job? And are you a good fit? Do you like the person? So the first thing really is and these are 5 things that I talk about, and I talk about these pretty much every week and every meeting that I do like this. And meaning, can you do the job just means, does the person have the intellectual ability and so forth to do the job? And then, can you be managed? And do they have the skills to do the job? And are they, if you're hiring someone to be a litigation attorney, can they write, and do they understand what the functions are, or can they learn? And then being managed means some people can't be managed. So some people have such an entrepreneurial bent, or such individuals that there's just no way that person is going to be managed, or they have problems they've had problems at previous employers and all sorts of things. So someone that can't be managed is never going to work out well, because they're not going to follow your directions. They're just not going to be good. And then, will you do the job long term? Just means, are you going to stick around, or are you probably going to leave? And so you can usually tell if someone's going to do the job long term based on just the stability in their background, like how many jobs they've had. Are all their jobs in a law firm as opposed to an in-house or other setting? Do they seem to prefer a law firm? What are their long-term objectives? Are they interested in the practice area? Do they seem committed to the practice area? And then, do you want the job? Are things that come across in terms of the person's demeanor and how enthusiastic they are? And so being able to be enthusiastic about the position and really coming across as having read about it and connecting with the subject matter, connecting with the people there, going out of their way to really want the job is important. And then the other is just, do you like the person? So if it's someone you're going to be working with, you have to be comfortable with them. You have to like them. And different types of firms will attract different types of people that are likable or not. And some law firms like introverts, others like extroverts. It depends on the firm. Those are really, in my opinion, the most important things that a law firm needs to look at when you're hiring someone. And depending on the qualifications that you want, sometimes law firms will be more interested in the person's qualifications, like their law school and so forth, which is essentially, can you do the job? But then they'll hire people that can't be managed, that won't do the job long term, that don't really want the job and aren't really that nice. So it just depends on what your goals are. But I think you have to have these 5 things fall in place. Let's see here. And these are some great questions here. So I appreciate everyone asking them. These are good questions. And the more you have. Okay, what are some of the most common mistakes made by law firm hiring partners during interviews? And how can these mistakes be avoided? A lot of mistakes that I see made during interviews. I think some of the biggest mistakes are when partners, and so when you have people interviewing that are talking down to the interviewees, and so they're not trying to connect with them, they're just basically trying to act important. So certain people will feel like a big deal because they're in their position of interviewing, and they'll talk down to interviewees. And so that's one of the big ones. The other one that I see law firms make is they sometimes are just so eager to bring people in that they don't really get beneath the surface about what's wrong with a person. So they hire people that are unlikely to stick around. I see people all the time that are hired that just when I look at their resume and I look at resumes all day long and I see the movement, I don't understand why each firm's hired them, because they never stay anywhere very long. You have to hire people that are going to be stable. You have to hire people that really want to be there. If you have to talk someone into working there, the odds are they're not going to stick around. And if someone isn't really enthusiastic about the job, then that's another thing. The other thing is that the interview needs to be a friendly thing. So you can't be at all confrontational in the interview. You don't want to ask questions that are too difficult, because that's scare people away. And you need to be very careful about not scaring candidates away when they're applying, because candidates will have a lot of different options and places usually they can work. So when law firms are not very nice to people during the interviews, then they lose control. So the best law firms are always very nice. There's some law firms that have a reputation of just having really not very nice people interviewing their candidates, and that holds them back. And then there's other law firms that put people in charge of interviewing that don't really want to do it, and they undermine the process. So you need to put your best people, typically interviewing the people that stand to gain the most, which are the attorneys, partners with business that are going to have people doing the work, and people that have some skin in the game. A lot of times law firms will look at hiring like it's not that important of a thing, especially at the associate level, and we'll put the wrong people in charge of it, and we'll almost make it like not their most important thing. And it really is. Nothing is more important than the quality of people you bring in. And then just knowing what the jobs are is another important thing. Okay, let's see here. What are some signs that the candidate may not be right for you? It depends on your firm, but in general, I think the biggest sign is if the person just doesn't really want the job. So I think anytime I've seen someone come in and not act enthusiastic about a job and not really get excited about it, then they're probably not going to be the right fit. So people that are going to be a good fit are going to be, for the most part, very enthusiastic when they come into interviews. And so they will want to impress you. They will want you to like them. They will really do everything that they can to look like the best candidate. And if they're not doing that, then they're probably not a good fit. Because if they're not sold right when they're walking in the door and they really don't want to work there when you're talking to them, then that's probably just going to continue later. And the other thing too is if you don't like the person, so there's a lot of studies done. So I've met people before, and I've met them and I thought this person looks dishonest. And then this person starts talking and I get to know them and I don't think they're dishonest. And then something, lo and behold, whether it's 6 months or a year or 3 months down the road, the person will do something dishonest to me. So I think a lot of times your first impressions are very important. And there's a book, I don't know, by Malcolm Gladwell or something, where they talk about the first impressions are usually the right. And that's just because your mind is processing like all these things in the background that no one's seeing. And if you're processing all these things in the background, then you're processing things at even an unconscious level. And because of that, many times there's just things that are happening in the background that helping you process things. So if you don't like somebody and someone doesn't, or you have a bad feeling about someone or all those sorts of things, then many times it's not a good idea to hire the person. Okay, and another question here. Where do you advertise or promote open positions? Okay, that's actually a very good question. So typically you need so we have one which you're welcome to use, and I think it's even free. It's called Hiring Partner, which is an applicant tracking system. So you typically, when you advertise positions, you want to make sure you always advertise them on your website. So that's the first thing. So you advertise them on your website, and then in addition to your website, you typically want to, so I'm just moving this here. Your website, you typically want to make sure that if you have an applicant tracking system, that you contact past applicants, which is always a good idea if you have an applicant tracking system. And then you just need to use different job sites. So there's all sorts of job sites out there. There's Law Crossing is our job site, but then there's Indeed, there's countless. All you need to do is just search online for job sites. And people will use, and there's actually Google for Jobs, which Google for Jobs will take the jobs from your website, and it will, if you have an applicant tracking system, and it will put them all over the web. And I mean, those are some of the ways you can advertise them. And then a lot of times people advertise in the local legal newspapers in the print edition, print and all sorts. And then you can also advertise in bar associations. And then many times there's practice area specific bars. Those are some of the ways. And then another good way is to your own attorney. So to your own attorney. So it's funny, like I had an issue this morning where we were having problems getting some work done here. And we've been advertising, this isn't legal related work. And we've been advertising, like looking for all these people for a long time, and nothing had been happening with it. And I got very frustrated, and I was getting mad at managers and stuff. And then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 people that were on this email string piped in and were like, I know this person that can do it. I know this person and this person. Just by our own attorneys, we're able to find people very quickly. So these are some of the ways to do it. And then that's really, in my opinion, one of the best ways to have your own attorneys and staff help you with advertising. And the way that we do it as a recruiting firm, what makes what we do very effective. So we go out certainly and we advertise jobs that we have, and that generates applicants every day. But most of our applicants that we get for jobs come through our own applicant tracking system, because when someone applies to work with us, we spend a lot of time classifying their resume and making sure that we understand exactly what they are. Then we rank them based on their suitability for different positions. And then when we have new jobs in the future, then we contact them. So we're contacting people about jobs, active candidates, and then previous candidates. And then also, when you put your jobs on your website, when people do searches online, then your jobs will start showing up in the search engine. So if people are doing a search for, say, a litigation attorney job in Fresno, California, if you have jobs on your website, then all of a sudden that are litigation jobs, those will also show up when people do searches, which is nice. So that's something that you should always be doing. So you need to get your jobs on your website. Hiring Partner can do that for you. You also need to contact all the past applicants if you can. You don't have to do that, but if you had an applicant tracking system, you could always send out an alert to them. You should be advertising your jobs on different sites to the extent you can. And usually national job sites are going to be a lot more effective than local legal newspapers. But if you're in a smaller area, like a desert community like Palm Springs or something, sometimes local newspapers may be effective. Same thing with bar associations, your attorneys and on staff. Another good way is to contact local law schools. If you contact local law schools and even other law schools in your state, they will always distribute those jobs to their people, and that can help you and usually drive a lot of candidates. Every time I'm looking to hire a entry-level attorney, I always, a lot of times will get applicants coming in from local law schools, because local law schools would distribute your jobs. So that's another good way to get your jobs out there. And then there's also all sorts of lists. There's Martindale used to be the big one, but there's all sorts of attorney lists out there of people. So a lot of law firms will actually be very proactive, and they will go out and email and contact people on those lists. Of course, I forgot about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is very effective too for reaching out to people. So you really, if you do all these things, you shouldn't have much trouble with the right people. It just depends on what type of job you have. There's certain types of practice areas that are very, very small. So there might be government contracts is not a huge practice area. So it's usually fairly easy to find who the people are. And there's other practice areas like litigation where, maybe you want a certain type of insurance litigation where you can find those attorneys online. So one thing that I really like is in general, I think Google is very effective. So Google just searching for different types of attorneys, just using the main search bar, can be very effective. And there's nothing wrong with the law firm contacting or just sending a job opening to someone. It can be very effective. People love being recruited. It makes them feel special. It makes them feel valuable. And so when a law firm does their own recruiting, that can be very helpful. But if you do all these things, you should theoretically be able to recruit on your own. I can tell you from the standpoint of running a recruiting firm that this is a ton of work and it's exhausting, and that someone could do this on their own. If you're in HR, there's no reason why you couldn't do any of this on your own. And even sometimes people, of course, and then you have recruiting firms, you can get them interested as well. Then recruiting firms can also help. All right, thank you. I enjoyed all the questions today. And then we do this call every week, and I will hopefully talk to some of you and see some of you next week as well. Thank you.